So let's talk about Kavanaugh first. Anna, tell us a little bit more about him.
So Kavanaugh is deeply conservative, deeply pro-business, which is evident in the way that he's ruled in the past. He has served as a federal judge, so he does have quite a bit of experience. But before I get into all of the different decisions that he's made or written, I do want to talk a little bit about his role in the Bill Clinton era. He worked with Ken Starr very closely for many years, and he played a role in helping to impeach Bill Clinton. So when he was being confirmed for a different role as a judge, it was a long and contentious process because there were a lot of worries by Democrats that he was too partisan to serve as an unbiased judge. But he eventually did get confirmed, and he went on to make all sorts of rulings as a federal judge. Now, one of the things that Trump apparently really liked about Kavanaugh was the fact that he went through those tumultuous times. The New York Times specifically says that Trump was looking for someone who had like those battle scars. And Trump also loved the fact that Kavanaugh had graduated from an Ivy League school. He went to Yale and then later Yale Law School. So he impressed Trump during his interview and was enthusiastically backed by the White House counsel, Don McGahn. So that's a little interesting tidbit there. Also, when it comes to his rulings, Kavanaugh claims that he takes precedent seriously. So on the issue of Roe v. Wade, he claims he has no interest in overturning it. But when it comes to business issues, that's where I'm most concerned. He did not appear to be a fan of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. 2015, he found that those directly regulated by the CFPB could challenge the constitutionality of its design. In October of 2016, Kavanaugh wrote for a divided panel finding that the CFPB's design was unconstitutional. Remember, this is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was created after the 2008 financial collapse, and the whole point was to prevent a future collapse and actually advocate for US consumers. Kavanaugh wasn't buying it. He felt that it was unconstitutional, but the circuit court actually reversed the judgment 7-4 over the dissent of Kavanaugh, meaning that the court eventually found that the CFPB was constitutional. Kavanaugh disagreed.
Yeah, so this breaks down to two camps, right? Social issues and business issues. So it's, first of all, when he says that he believes in precedent and Roe versus Wade is precedent, I don't believe him. I've yet to see a conservative judge, other than actually, to be fair, there's actually about two that have stuck with that. Back when I was a Republican and I was judicially conservative, and I would argue that I am still judicially conservative, not politically, but judicially. There were two judges who were really well renowned back then, and they have remained consistent on the issues. But outside of them, every other conservative judge that I saw that I was told has these principles, etc. No, they don't. They will overturn any precedent if it doesn't match their political beliefs. And the biggest hypocrite of them all was Scalia. And to give you an example of Kavanaugh's track record, not as a judge, but in another part of his career, he represented Bush and Bush v. Gore in the 2000 elections, right? So, well, the conservatives in that case totally trashed states' rights, which they had claimed to be in favor of all along. Let alone precedent, let alone so many other of the principles that the conservatives pretended that they care a lot about. But it turns out Kavanaugh and the rest of the conservatives, and certainly the ones on the Supreme Court at the time, didn't care about it at all. It turns out that they didn't mean states' rights, they just meant the states' rights to discriminate against black people. But once it's the states' right to actually protect the vote, they're like, no, you don't get to protect the vote. So Kavanaugh was on the wrong side of that and didn't seem to care about any of those principles at that point. Now, to be fair, he wasn't a judge at that point and he was an advocate, I understand that. But it would be shocking if he actually cared about precedent. And almost every conservative on the Supreme Court today, I've seen all their confirmation hearings and I've seen when they were announced, and they all say the same thing. I'm here to call balls and strikes. That's what John Roberts famously said. In this case, Kavanaugh said, being a judge is just about what's right and what's wrong. Well, that's curious. And why do you come out on the conservative side politically on almost every single decisions? Come on, you tell me politics doesn't matter. And he also said that it's a standard trite thing you're supposed to say when you're looking to get confirmed. Politics, well, golly gee, I would never allow politics to interfere in my decisions. But somehow magically you voted with the Republicans and pro-business interests 100% of the time.
Right, so I actually want to give you an example pertaining to abortion. And it's not comparing apples to apples exactly, but it's still a ruling that, or a decision that he wrote in regard to abortion. So if you guys can recall, this wasn't too long ago, in October of 2017, there was this huge controversy involving the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And they apparently had an undocumented immigrant in their custody who was pregnant and who was seeking abortion. And so the courts got involved in this, and they had this unsigned divided panel opinion, and Kavanaugh essentially said, no, the Office of Refugee Resettlement could prevent an unaccompanied minor in its custody from obtaining an abortion. That was what he wrote. Now, of course, later it was decided that she could get the abortion, and she did, but Kavanaugh wasn't necessarily consistent.
What happened with precedent and not being against Roe versus Wade? That's interesting. So look, am I positive that he's going to rule against Roe versus Wade? No, I'm not. And I just don't believe him when he says he cares about precedent. I don't know that he's ever shown that. I don't know that any conservative judge, other than the two that I mentioned, have shown that. And by the way, those conservative judges that actually stuck to principle are now considered even though they're among the most scholarly, not possible for the Supreme Court because they did not follow conservative political ideology, not legal or judicial, right? So now one of them was Easterbrook, by the way. But to me, the main reason that he's picked is the main reason why most of these justices are picked, and to some degree, even the Democrats do this. Is he pro-business enough? That is the number one and overwhelming consideration. And in the case of Kavanaugh, like with Gorsuch, he has raised his hand and said, corporate masters, what do you need? Yeah. You want me to destroy consumer protection? I'll gut it, right? You need anything done, I am your guy. That's how you get to be picked to be on the Supreme Court. And that is why right now, the Supreme Court, even with Kennedy, the so-called moderate on there, is the most pro-corporate court we have ever had in our history. And it keeps getting more and more pro-corporate as we go along. So he will be in favor of Citizens United. He will be in favor of every single thing that the corporations want. And he will look to crush the average American worker and any rights you might have left.
And keep in mind, things are already bad in that realm of US politics because, okay, let's just talk about the CFPB for a minute. Mick Mulvaney, as the acting director of the CFPB, gutted that agency to the point where it had absolutely no power. So those consumer protections essentially gone. It's now understaffed and has essentially been castrated. Can't do anything. On the Supreme Court side, it was already pro-business with the confirmation of Kavanaugh, assuming that he does get confirmed, and I would venture to say he will. It will become even more pro-business. We're already having an issue with antitrust laws not being enforced. We have these massive corporate mergers, which are essentially shedding jobs in consolidation and also leaving Americans with few options when it comes to big financial decisions like telecommunications companies, for instance. There's monopoly after monopoly when it comes to that kind of stuff. If you're living in a certain community, you have no options. You have to go with one of these massive telecommunications companies. So look, it keeps getting worse. And I don't, even if Kavanaugh didn't get confirmed, even if we had a liberal get chosen for the Supreme Court, things have gotten so bad when it comes to politicians in bed with corporations that I don't know how this country is going to end up, but it's not looking good.
Yeah, and remember, the one the Democrats are most upset about is Merrick Garland. That's Obama, nominated him, and the Republicans wouldn't let him up for a vote for a year. But Merrick Garland had also voted in favor of Citizens United, and the Democrats made all sorts of excuses. Oh, he had to. No, other judges voted the other way in that case. He didn't have to.
Right.
He chose to vote for Citizens United. So whether it was Obama or it's Trump, yes, Trump's picks are way more extreme. And yes, on social issues, they do differ significantly. So you have to call it as it is. But on corporate issues, they will rule us, right? That's why, by the way, we have to go above the head of the Supreme Court and get an amendment to get money out of politics. Otherwise, all the politicians are going to be forever corrupt, and they're going to pick the most corrupt judges. And that's how the system works. That's why you must get an amendment. Now, last things on Kavanaugh. Two things I want to talk about. How did he get the job? Well, there were a couple of strikes against him. One was that he was close to the Bush family, and Trump didn't like that. Okay.
Well, Trump's aides didn't like that. They consider that to be, well, I'm sure Trump didn't like it either, but his aides argued that being associated to the Bush family in any way is not a politically popular thing. It's actually a strike against you, which I thought was fascinating.
And he doesn't like the Bush family. And they're also worried that since Kavanaugh is more of a divisive figure, that he'll have a harder path to confirmation. Mitch McConnell's worried about that. Trump considered that as well. Now, so what were the things that were going for him? The Ivy League education that Anna mentioned, because Trump's all about appearances. Oh, okay, you sound really educated. That sounds really good. I like that. He liked that he was in a battle.
Yes.
Now, credit to Trump on that one, because Democrats would be like, oh, no battles, no, right? Whereas Trump was like, oh, you were in a battle, that's good, I like that.
He wants someone who can fight.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that makes sense. And then finally, as we saw at the very beginning of the press conference announcing the pick, he was good at doing the main thing that Trump likes, which is praising Trump. So he got up there and he's like, no president has ever talked to as many people as Donald Trump before making this selection and has worked as hard. I'm like, oh, please. No one believes that. And how would you even know that? Do you know how many presidents, how many people that Obama and Clinton and Bush spoke to before making their selection? You don't know that at all, okay? Okay, I get it, you wanna kiss his ass, but it worked,
Yeah, it did work.
And so now the last thing is, he argued for a separation of powers, right? And he said he believes in the rule of law, et cetera. Again, I don't really take anything he says at face value, but if he did mean that, well, that would be interesting. Another part of his career was that he was on Ken Starr's impeachment team with Bill Clinton. Now, if he applies the same standards to Donald Trump as he did for Bill Clinton, well, that could be bad news for Donald Trump. Now, the good news for Donald Trump is that conservatives are almost universally hypocrites and don't care at all about what they've said in the past and will contradict themselves without a moment's thought or hesitation. So my guess is he'll turn right around and go, impeachment? Broad qualifications for impeachment? No, I meant really narrow. It's a thing that you really shouldn't countenance at all, is my guess. And my guess as to what Trump cared about the most, et cetera. But we'll see.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate thing about a Supreme Court pick is you won't see it until it's too late.
Yeah.
So when they go in front of Senate, they will obfuscate, they will try to evade all of the questions, and if absolutely forced to, they will lie. And they've all done it, and they all say political opinions. Oh golly, gee, that would never affect me. But somehow, the ones picked by Democrats almost always support the liberal positions, and the ones, except for business, but the business must win no matter what, right? And the ones picked by the conservatives always support the conservative political positions. So what happened to just calling balls and strikes? No, it's all BS, and that's what you're going to see in the confirmation hearings.